I told her, I don't have the time nor the inclination, ma'am, to explain to you the logistics behind a multi-billion-dollar international airline. So why don't you go ahead and have a seat. When the gate agent calls your name, you're ready to go. Until then, I'd appreciate you to sit down. The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 101 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on Thursday, February 3rd, 2022, from Studio 433 at the Hilton Garden Inn in Arlington, Texas. I'll tell you what, in the middle of Winter Storm Landon. On today's flight, Rob D. and Kyle J. and I discuss Winter Storm Landon, off-schedule operations, booking your own hotels, Uber rides, RTGs, checklist usage, uncomfortable flight crew members, and informational picketing. We look forward to having you join us as we prepare to depart on Flight 101 of the Squawk Ident podcast. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 101 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway.
Captain, how soon can you land? I can't tell. You can tell me, I'm a doctor. No, I'm just not sure.
Joining us for this segment of the flight is an exceptional aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is an OSU Pistol Pete loving grad, an ASL linguist, a creator and director of the Aviation Business Information Board on Facebook, a cadet pilot mentor, a new dad, and a DFW Airbus pilot at Legacy Airlines. From his podcast studio, where he is enjoying some extra time at home due to weather cancellations, from somewhere in Roanoke, Texas, please help us in welcoming to the show, Mr. Kyle J. Kyle, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right, man. So you're at home. You're supposed to be flying right now, sir. What is going on?
Well, we got caught up in the winter storm and coming back through DFW yesterday. Had some maintenance issues on the airplane, and we were out of airplanes to swap and didn't quite make it down to McAllen last night. And so came home last night, and with all the backups today in DFW, everything's canceled for today. So I was able to get home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Much better than last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the Snowmageddon was definitely...
Not just that, but last year, a wife was pregnant. She was 8 months pregnant with Olivia, and I got stuck down in Puerto Vallarta for 3 days. So, you know.
So while your wife was at home struggling with labor pains and not having the support she needed, you were in Puerto Vallarta sipping margaritas on the beach.
With the rest of the cruise, yep.
Yeah, well, you had a responsibility to be social with your crew members. Right? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad everything worked out fine and you made it home today or last night. So, man, just fantastic news that you're home and get to spend some time there. And you have a moment to share with us here on the show. We've missed you in the past couple of shows. And I know we've gone back and forth talking about, you know, schedules and availability, and that's why we have so many Squawk Ident co-hosts, is so that at least somebody's available to do the show. Now, also joining us today is another superb aviator and Squawk Ident podcast co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the ING Club, an AMP, an avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. Trapped by Winter Storm Landon on the 11th floor of the Sheraton in downtown Oklahoma City. Help us in welcoming our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm staying warm, and I think I see Jack Frost outside and Frosty the Snowman having a drink together.
Yeah.
They're all they're having a good time outside.
Yeah,
It's crazy out there.
What's the outside air temperature where you're at?
Oh, I haven't even checked, but it's probably in the 20s. Let's see what the Weather Channel's calling it. It's cold though. It's windy. I think the gusts are up around 25, 30 knots right now. Oklahoma City says it's 14, and the wind chill is -2. So it's pretty chilly.
Very nice, very nice. Good day to go for a walk.
Yeah, right.
Going for a good run.
Going out there.
You have your cleats with you, right?
Yeah, I had my snowshoes with me.
Well, current wind conditions in the Dallas-Fort Worth area are 330 at 19, gusting 23. 9 miles viz, broken at 1,700, temperature -5 degrees centigrade, and pretty high pressure, 30.21 on the meter. So not bad. Last night was a different story. We we ended up here in Dallas. Now, I'm not supposed to be in Dallas right now. I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm actually in Arlington, home of the Dallas Cowboys training facility. Tell you what, dang it. What happened is we almost made it back to San Diego because I was in San Diego 2 nights ago, and then yesterday morning flew one leg into Dallas, had about a 3-hour sit. We were texting back and forth, who's in Dallas? Let's get together. And I was the only one. And that 3-hour sit turned into a 4-hour sit because of a delayed inbound flight. The TAF, the Terminal Area Forecast, which is what aviators use to judge what the weather will be like at your destination at a particular time of arrival, so that you can judge the legality of if you need an alternate or not, or what kind of approach is being used, all that kind of stuff. So the TAF was indicating that we were going to have freezing rain starting about the same time we were originally scheduled to depart. So we knew, the captain and I knew, we were already on borrowed time. And the inbound flight was a little late, and I was at the gate watching the passengers deplane. And then the captain and first officer that brought the airplane in, and from San Diego as well, same flight number, he said, hey man, sorry to tell you, but we had to call maintenance. We had a low pressure indicator on the flight attendant control panel for the 2L door, which is the emergency exit door in the mid cabin. And we're like, okay, well, they're coming out. You gotta do what you gotta do. So I did my pre-flight. Captain set up his nest in the cockpit, got everything situated, downloaded the appropriate flight plan and weather charts that he needed. And maintenance came out, took the book. They held boarding because maintenance was in the cabin taking care of an inspection. And after about 20 minutes, he came back and said, hey, I checked the 2R door, and yeah, it's fine. There's a little bit of binding. The pressure was good. We're going to just make a note of it, and you should be good to go. Are you okay with that? I was like, yeah, if you say it's good, it's good. Let's go. So we boarded up, and now it started to rain. We get a message through the printer from dispatch, from SOC, Systems Operation Control. And they said, hey, they're going to be changing the METAR here any second to light freezing rain. Be advised that freezing rain, or moderate freezing rain, does not have any holdover times. They do not exist, meaning the de-icing process that you are inevitably going to have to go through, there is no holdover time. So takeoffs are not authorized. So we knew, again, we were on borrowed time and we needed to get out of there. Well, as we're sitting there, they start to board the aircraft. Maintenance had just handed over the book, and we hear, ding, APU bleed fault. Now, at this time, the APU was running. The bleed air from the APU, or the hot air that comes off the APU that we use, the pneumatic air that we use to start engines, to run air conditioning and heating packs, things like that, it had a fault. So it stopped. It shut off. And it's like, hey, while you're here, can you take a look at this? He's like, well, let's try doing a reset. Control, Alt, delete. Now, it's not quite that simple. In the aircraft, what we have to do is the maintenance has procedures. He downloaded it onto his tablet. Maintenance uses a tablet just like pilots do. And the procedure was to shut down the APU, pull a couple circuit breakers, wait 30 seconds, push the circuit breakers back in, restart the APU, and try the bleed. We did that, and it was successful. Meanwhile, we're monitoring, while we're there in the flight deck, we're monitoring operations frequencies in case we need anything like extra supplies, more fuel, whatever. So we're monitoring the frequency, and I'm hearing on low volume in the background, yeah, we have APU bleed fault. We're going to call maintenance. Oh, yeah, we have an APU bleed fault too. 20 Airbus A320s had the exact same ECAM message. Electronic Clue Alerting Messaging.
I forgot what it already stands for.
So
we've said it like 4 or 5 times in other podcasts.
It's one of those things. It's an ECAM. That's all I need to know. ECAM.
Yeah.
So we got this ECAM message, and 20 other people. Now, it was raining heavily. It wasn't quite freezing rain, but the temperature was 0, so centigrade. So it was right at the freezing point. And that's what the dispatcher was saying at that time. They were sending us this message. Hey, you can anticipate they're changing it to freezing rain. If it's light freezing rain, you do have holdover times. Consult the chart. But if it's moderate or greater freezing rain, you're done. So the procedure was successful. He handed us back the book. We're now boarding the aircraft. Life is good. We're all just wanting to get out of there. We didn't want to be stuck in Dallas with the weather. And I know, Kyle, you were talking about having the cancellations start to come up. They started canceling flights yesterday for today. And it's one of those things where you can see the snowball coming. You just, everything in your body says to get out of the way, but you just can't make it happen, and you get hit in the head by a snowball. That is exactly what it was like on the flight deck. And so we push off the gate, and we're thinking, holy mackerel, we're getting out of here. And the captain goes, yes, we're getting. I'm like, don't say it. Don't say it, because you guys know what happens, right? And we get ding. And like, okay, I'm in the process of starting an engine. The captain had just given the salute to the ground personnel. So they in the tug and the tow bar and the 3 thugs in a tug, right? They all drive off. And he answers the flight attendant, and it's our purser, our number 1 flight attendant. And she says, my panel indicates that the 2L door has a fault in the pressurization.
No,
like, maintenance was just out here. We delayed this flight even further than it was already delayed to get this cleared. They cleared the book. What? Are you serious? So she's like, yeah, I took a picture of the gauge, and it's in the green. So I don't know what to tell you. And our book says to let you know, and maintenance is supposed to look at it. And the captain says, well, Tony, what should we do? And mind you, we had a jump seater as well, a new hire jump seater that was getting a ride home. And the 3 of us kind of looked at each other, and we're like, well, everything on our engine crew alerting display says the slides are armed, everything's good. The physical gauge says it's in the green. And we start scratching our heads going, could it be the same issue with rain and sensors? And her panel says one door, it's armed, but it has low pressure. Is it the slide pressure? The slide may not inflate. The gauge is in the green. It says that the slide has ample pressure. It must be an anomaly. So we had a little bit of a debate, and the captain asked me, what do you think, Tony? And I said, well, we live in a world where it's all or nothing when it comes to feeling comfortable. Why don't we just to see what's going on, let's ask the number 2 flight attendant that's sitting there what she thinks, so that we can have this break down this barrier of communication and just make sure that we're all on the same page here. Because if we go right back to the gate, we were debating, possibly this could be an anomaly that's, maybe something we can overlook. But at the same time, I'm thinking, anything were to happen, we're the ones that are going to be on the carpet doing the dance. So just as a process, we had the number 2 flight attendant come up and talk to us. And she said, I don't feel comfortable sitting there. That door might swing wide open during flight. I don't even want to sit there for takeoff. I'm going to go sit somewhere else. And the captain goes, wait a minute. No, the door doesn't swing open. It's mechanical. It's the slide pressurization is what you're telling me. The fault is on your panel. We don't even see your panel. But everything physical is saying that there's pressure, that it's good. So we're kind of just trying to get your take on things because you guys are the ones that are back there 24/7. We're, I don't feel comfortable with this. I need to go back to the gate. He goes, okay, well, let's see what happens. Well, we're finishing our flows and our checklist. Now I'm trying to get a word in edgewise with ramp to say, hey, let's go back to the gate. And I always leave, like I can listen in on the communications that are happening in the cabin. And I like to leave that on my radio control panel at very low volume from pushback until takeoff. And when we're number 1, I mute it so that it's not a distraction. And then after 10,000 feet, I reselect the cabin intercom on, because more than once it's happened where they're asking for a doctor on board. Before they talk to us, they're taking care of a medical emergency or a passenger that's being disruptive. They haven't talked to us yet, but I'm, as the pilot monitoring up there, I get a little bit of a head start. It catches my ear. Whatever I'm doing, whatever conversation we're having, it stops. We now are prepared mentally. We're not taken off guard when they finally call us a few minutes later and go, yeah, there's a guy back here having medical issues and we have a doctor working on him. And we're like, whoa. So we're, it's a habit. It's a technique. Well, I did that. And I hear them having a conversation about, I don't feel comfortable with this. We can't I'm going to call my in-flight manager and I'm going to have to report this and stuff. And both of us, actually all 3 of us up there, all look at each other like, give us time to resolve this. Okay, come. And so the captain gets upset. I'm upset. So he immediately cues up the cabin intercom microphone and that just the flight attendants can hear, not the passengers. He goes, do we have a problem here? Why are you talking behind my back? I told you we were going to handle it. Do we have a problem here? And she said, no, Captain, we don't have a problem. I was like, well, we're going back to the gate, but you have to, just don't do that. Don't talk behind our back. If you have a problem, talk to us. We're more than willing to stop what we're doing and talk to you. So that was a little bit of a poker, adding to the stress level that was already there. And we talk about outside factors all the time, right? Distractors. And let's add up what we had so far. And we're not even halfway through our situation here. We had weather deteriorating. We had de-icing procedures that were now relatively complicated because it wasn't just a straightforward, oh, it's snowing, we're going to get de-iced, because we had factors there. We had delays due to maintenance. We had a recurring maintenance issue that was allegedly cleared in the book that reoccurred. Now we have cabin crew members that are uncomfortable with the situation. And in the past, in our history of aviation and flying, what the captain said went. If the captain said, we'll just handle it when we get there, nobody said anything. No one dared go against what the captain said. It's his or her vessel, his or her responsibility. But today, we live in a different world. And if one person is uncomfortable, then whether they're right or wrong, we have to listen to them, because a phone call is going to be made, a video is going to be taken, and something's going to get posted. Rob, have you ever experienced a scenario that played out like this?
No, that's pretty unique. So really, I know it happens, but it's pretty rare. There's been some times, weather-wise, where people were uncomfortable going, but they weren't the decision makers, kind of thing. A cabin crew was nervous about taking off into the wind, with the gusty winds or something like that. But, it's as long as obviously if it's within our limitations and within our SOPs, and, we're good to go. And then we use our judgment to determine whether it's safe. And that those kind of decisions, it's not up to the cabin crew to decide whether we go or not. But they felt uncomfortable and they were voicing their opinion. But in your particular case, mechanical stuff, that's kind of it doesn't happen very often like that, and obviously y'all there was something going on with the airplane, and I agree with you. Nothing's going to happen to the airplane, but there's something that needs to be addressed, and since there's more than one or two sets of ears that are behind the door of the airplane, then that's already too late. You kind of have to address it
Yeah.
with maintenance. But yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, with all the external distractors and the weather pressing, I mean, see, and this is part of the whole experience stuff that we continuously talk about as another factor where you kind of have to use your blinders or your earmuffs to try to ignore some of those external distractors and just work the problem that's immediately in front of you, which is at that point the airplane. The weather's irrelevant at that point because you haven't launched into it yet.
Yeah, that's just something on the horizon. You have to take care of the immediate. Now, this goes against the human factors that we discuss as aviators from the very first day of our private pilot training. Is we are so focused when we're learning to fly that we have this tunnel vision, this laser focus, because we're trying to keep it on the rails within PTS or whatever you call it nowadays. And as you get more experience, your field of vision widens. And now you can kind of get a bigger and bigger picture until you see the whole picture, hopefully before you upgrade to become command of an aircraft or pilot PIC. Now, Kyle, you deal with a lot of student pilots, cadet program. You're mentoring quite a few people right now. Our hiring practices from now and into the future are going to be out of control. I honestly don't know how the airline companies here in the U.S. are going to be able to keep up with the demand and the numbers that they keep publishing. Having the background that you do, having your father who is a very senior Czech airman here at Legacy, so that mentality. And at the end of the day, and I've said this from day one, it's all about protecting your certificate. If you get called into a commission, a place where there's judgment to be had, a FAA review board, anything, are the decisions you made with the interest of safety to the flight first or your own interest first? Kyle, how do you see this from a more, I hate to say company perspective, but how do you see this from a perspective of protecting your certificate?
Well, Tony, safety is always going to be the number one issue. Is the airplane is safe to go? The weather safe to go? Obviously, you make those decisions as a crew. But in this particular case with the door, if they didn't feel comfortable, if maintenance came on, said it was okay, if everything indicated up front, if they're still getting panel issues in the back, maybe come back to the gate and get it checked out again. And if somebody's uncomfortable, you can't force them to go. That's just the number one thing. Everybody's comfort level is different on whatever situation you're facing. And in this case, would have returned to the gate and get it looked at again. And if that flight attendant needed to be removed, then so be it. Or if it was that big of an issue, find another airplane. But yeah, everything goes back to safety, and you guys hit the nail right on the head. Between all the phones, recording, the he said, she said, it's your word against their word. But at the end of the day, as a PIC, you're not only looking after the airplane, you got a full crew you got to accommodate in situations like this.
Yeah. And this is what ended up happening. Just like you said, we had to make these decisions as a crew. And although we kind of saw it as, hey, in our experience, it wasn't really a safety to flight issue because we believed at the time with the information that we had that everything was in the green, and this electronic or computerized panel, a touchscreen panel that they have there in their galley, says there's something was wrong with the pressurization of the door. It just said door slide fault. That's all it said. So we thought it was the door slide. Well, we were like, hey, you know what? I know we were kind of leaning towards getting checked out where we went, which the company would always say, no. Liability is what runs airline companies, not safety, not money, not customer service. Liability. The company is going to protect themselves from being liable. So they'll always back up a crew that makes a decision to return to a gate, delay a flight, cancel a flight because of safety, because the repercussions of something happening where it could have been avoided are too great of a loss, financially, reputation-wise, everything. So we're like, you know what? I know we're kind of talking about this, but at that point, the captain goes, yeah, we're going back to the gate. We kind of already decided that, but now it was like just in your face. And so we went back to the gate.
What I didn't like about the flight attendants was them all talking amongst themselves and not talking to the flight crew. There's the first issue.
Yes.
That if anything would have come up, that would have been, well, we weren't notified in the cockpit, and we're a crew. We're supposed to communicate, and in this case, it didn't happen. And luckily, you guys were listening in on the conversation. I don't know how many crews do that, but you guys were listening in and caught it prior to any issues, because let's just say, hey, you're doing your after start checklist and your flows and all that. We're all right. We're mentally thinking, okay, we got to get de-iced. We're behind schedule. We have a limited window to get airborne. And in the back, they're talking about, I don't feel comfortable. I'm calling my manager. Well, how do you know while we're taxing out that they don't feel comfortable without calling you guys?
Right.
You don't.
So,
and that's one of the first things that we brief, that I've picked up on a lot from a lot of captains. And even when I've been in the left seat with people, if you have any issues, we're a crew, we got to operate together, speak up. Any issues, any problems, any safety related things, speak up, because that's how things get resolved.
Yeah. Well, it gets better, because when we returned to the gate, remember earlier I said there were 20 aircraft that had APU bleed faults happening. Obviously, you don't get 20 airplanes having the exact same error message unless there's a common denominator, and that was heavy rain at a freezing point. So clearly there was a sensor in the APU bay, which is in the tail cone of the aircraft, that had some kind of problem with the moisture level or the cold. The cold, not so much, because when you're flying at altitude and when you're operating in cold weather, you never really see this. But with all the heavy rain, clearly some sensor, some cannon plug, some electrical component was being shorted, causing the bleed valve to not know if it was open or closed, or be in an intermediary position. And because of that, the fault would automatically close the APU bleed valve. Now you don't have pneumatic air to do things like start engines, run heating. So we knew that maintenance was going to be overwhelmed, and it was going to be now a long period of time before we got the service that we were requesting. We returned to the gate. Now we had no jet bridge driver. Now, Dallas is famous, at least for Legacy Airlines, for using an electronic component that's called the DGS. The DGS is the digital guiding or gate guidance system. And what happens is, instead of needing a guideman or wing walkers, and I don't know what the woke terminology is for guideman, guide person?
That was probably it.
Yeah. So you don't need that. all you need is the DGS, and it tells you, first it identifies your aircraft. So you have to identify it. Like if you're flying a 321, it should say 321-200. And once you get within, I think, 35 feet, it starts giving you a countdown. Tells you left, right, tells you slow down if you're going too fast. And then once it counts down in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. And that's when you stop, set the brakes, shut down the engines. At that point, the clock stops. The flight crew stops getting paid. It is no longer the parking brake set and a door open.
16 feet, Tony.
Oh, once you get to within 16 feet?
No. It stops within the 16 feet. So if you don't see a jet bridge driver, just tell the captain to stop just short of 16 feet because you're still on the clock.
See?
Almost stop at 17 feet.
Yes.
Tell them stop at 20 feet.
Yes.
But here's the problem. We couldn't really see because of the design of that particular jet bridge at that gate. We couldn't see. We saw the light was on. We assumed. We had enough going on. We weren't thinking about that. We park at the gate. So now, call operations. Yeah, we need a jet bridge driver as soon as possible. We have maintenance, it's going to be coming. We're also a return to gate, so I had to contact SOC, let them know we returned to gate and why. Now we had to make PAs to the passengers. We had already made PAs throughout the whole process. This is why we're returning to the gate, ladies and gentlemen, this and that. Now we get a message from SOC. You no longer have light freezing rain. Now it's moderate freezing rain. All operations, landing and takeoffs have stopped in Dallas-Fort Worth. Right. We could have been in the air, but we had this issue. We had to take care of it. There's no choice. The options are out of our hands. And when maintenance came on board, a few of them came on board. And they went back and with their flashlights and everything, they looked. The door has 2 gauges, not 1. So when we saw pressure's in the green, when the previous maintenance worker saw pressure was in the green and they signed it off as pressure okay, they didn't realize it wasn't the slide at all. It was the actuator, the hydraulic actuator that assists the door opening when you open the door and the slide is armed. That actuator has its own gauge. That gauge, you have to look with a flashlight through a crack in the apron that surrounds it near the door hinge. That was in the yellow. Barely, but in the yellow. So they had an indication on the flight attendant control panel that we were thinking maybe it's just a false thing with all the rain, because that's what's happening with these APU bleed valves. And it reminded me of an email that the company has sent out for years periodically. We are not allowed to diagnose mechanical problems as flight crews. Systems knowledge is only there to help assist in the knowledge of how the system works, not how to fix it or troubleshoot it. And thus opens a whole new debate, which we won't be getting into today. So we both looked at each other, the captain and I, very humbled in the situation. Though we did the right thing and put safety first, put the comfort of our crew members first, and returned to the gate without argument, we were humbled in the fact that something else was going on, and it wasn't what we thought. And we both looked at each other and said, man, we really dodged a bullet on this one. Now, was it a safety to flight issue? No. What are the odds of having to open a door in in-flight evacuation or evacuation?
Or the plane's going to fly perfectly fine with that.
Right. The door is not going to pop open in the middle of a flight or takeoff. All these things that were outside factors being thrown at us, distractors. And so you have to have a little humility. And I kind of felt a little upset at myself that I was kind of pushing, like, really? Look at all, we're not going to make it out of here. The weather's going to get bad. And it just reminded me that slow down, take your time, always when in doubt, put the safety of everybody on board first, including yourself. And just go get it checked out. We get paid by the minute, even though the clock stopped and we had to wait 20 minutes for a jet bridge driver. So we sat there 20 minutes, like,
Did they put RTG back on your schedule?
Yes. Yeah, they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We ended up sending whatever
Okay.
appropriate
Okay.
messages that the captain took care of, and to make sure that we're justly compensated for our time, that we're responsible for the flight. If you're responsible for the flight, you should be compensated as such. So that turned into a canceled flight because, one, no flights were taking off, and the TAF wasn't going to improve anytime soon, not within the following few hours. Two, they had to deplane the aircraft and open and close the door in order to check it and pressurize it, and they wouldn't do that under those weather conditions with passengers on board. On top of that, maintenance didn't want to do that at all in the elements. They wanted to take the plane to the hangar. At first, we were told they're going to find you another airplane. And I said, wait a minute, you got 20 broken airplanes and you're going to find me another airplane in the next hour before we time out? Nah. So after a good sit in the operations center at Dallas for Legacy Airlines, we finally got, hey, you're canceled, and go ahead and take care of booking yourself a hotel. Have either of you gentlemen had to use the Biz Hero app?
No. I'll refuse to use it.
Oh, both of you.
I
Okay.
have it on my iPad, but I haven't used it yet, and I've read some pretty what do you call it? Social media posts that people were pretty pissed off that it didn't work, or they had to use it, or we're not contractually obligated to use it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
here's what's happening with that. When we have off-schedule operations, meaning more than, I think, 6% of the flights are canceled or delayed due to weather systems, acts of God beyond the control of the airline, we have what's called off-schedule operations. Some other airlines call it different things. What did we used to call that over at Sandpiper? IROPS, or irregular ops?
IROPS, yeah, irregular operations.
Yeah. So whenever the company announces this, they also send out an email, or at least over at Legacy, that we have to book our own hotels. Why? Because years ago, the company decided to outsource the hotel and transportation services to an outside vendor or third-party vendor. They take care of all the contracts and reservations for the hotel accommodations and transportation for every single crew member in the company for every single day of the month. When everything goes to plan, it's a relatively smooth operation. The minute you throw a wrench in the system, things don't get corrected in a timely manner like they used to. Now, the company would know there's a weather event coming in, and they would have people on standby, ready to go, working from home, what have you. But when you contract out the weather or the hotel and transportation services, you have no control over what their staffing ability is, or what they're doing. So that's what's happening. And now this app that we have on our EFB, we as a crew member, if it's announced that we're to use it, we can book our own hotel through the app. The company pays for it through the company's credit, what have you, that's on file. And you book your own hotel. Now, the transportation is another story. If you book a hotel that is at the airport, they usually have a van, no problem. But when you have massive cancellations in a weather event in Dallas with 2 to 4 inches of snow, which that's what we had so far today, then good luck. So we found a hotel that was a little further south in Arlington, and the captain says, you know what, let's both book the same hotel at the same place. And we were sat there with both of our EFBs. We each booked our hotels, and he says, I'll Uber it and expense it. And that's what we did. And we got to the hotel a little after midnight last night, very much delayed. But it was a painless process. People at the gate or at the front desk were very, very accommodating, and they actually knew we were coming. They had our names, they had everything printed out, ready to go, our rooms ready. So it's actually not a bad process. I tried calling the hotel desk. They never answered the phone. They actually hung up after 20 minutes of being on hold. So that's when we decided, you know what, let's just do the Biz Hero thing. And then today they canceled my flight leaving. So now I have one flight today, which is DFW to DFW to Ontario tonight. And whether or not that airplane departs from Denver, where they currently are scheduled to depart from in the next 30 minutes, will be very interesting.
It will, Tony. They're used to the snow.
Yeah.
Well,
They can
whether they
handle it up there in
depart
Denver.
is not really as
The ice,
questionable as
that's
if they
what they're used
land.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it looks like the weather's gonna, I don't know. I was looking at the weather app now. It looks like it should start letting up here pretty soon. But
yeah, it actually stopped
anyway.
snowing here now. So
yeah,
that's a good thing.
And we'll be right back, right after the break.
But thank you
that's
for
a crazy story, man.
Yeah, thank you for entertaining me as I explained that the situation there. But yeah, making a sound decision, putting safety first, and thinking about the L word. It's unfortunate that we can't just go, look, what's good and what's wrong. It turned out that it was the best decision because there was something going on that we didn't even think of. We thought we knew better, but we didn't. So if you find yourself in this situation, keep that in the back of your mind. We get paid by the minute. And whether or not we get their itis, go home leg, whatever. There's weather coming. I have plans on the layover. Don't let that sway your judgment.
Yeah, a lot of guys, a lot of aviators use the comical phrase, hey, if you have a decision to make, let's start at the NTSB hearing and work your way back. And that should help you make the decision.
Yeah.
Or you could, let's start at the chief pilot's office and work your way back. Or let's start at, in the living room talking to your wife or how you got yourself into this situation and work your way back. So, it can go a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So Kyle, recently I've been following, as I do every day, your aviation information business board, and fantastic articles every day about the industry, about our industry. I think it's important that we all at least spend a few minutes a day to keep up with our careers, because it's important to have this knowledge. If you just show up and do your job and clock out, go home, and never think about it again, that's what a lot of pilots do, especially at this level. But I think it's important. Now, you recently put up a posting about an article that Legacy Airlines is going to be getting a lot of airplanes. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, Tony. We're supposed to get 16 787s between last year and this year. With the manufacturing issues, only one was delivered last year. So everything was pushed back to this year, to 2022. Beginning of the year, Boeing came out and told Legacy Carrier that, or Legacy Airlines, that we shall receive the rest of the 16 787-9s this year. And that was January. A few days ago, regarding the article, it was announced that still due to manufacturing issues, which are meaning we're not getting supplies in the timely fashion as what was proposed, that we're only getting 4 787-9s. However, with all the MAX issues the last couple years, those airplanes have been continuing to be built. We do have a firm order of 30 of those. They did not come out with the timeline of those. However, I'm guessing it's going to continue on our order books to replace the older aircraft. So we'll know here another quarter or two. I think they're going quarter by quarter basis, depending on the manufacturer needs for future delivery dates. But in the meantime, with all this, excuse me, Boeing has agreed to pay legacy airlines the money that we're losing on these routes that we've already announced 2 years ago. And that could mean anywhere from paying for the route to restructuring an airplane deal, maybe negotiating on the 777X. There's tons of variables that go along with it that they usually keep hush hush. But so in hindsight, we're not really losing any money right now. We're actually I wouldn't say making a profit off of it, but we're not losing any money. So Boeing's paying for it. And in the meantime, this last 2 years, between all the legacy carriers that operate the 787, they have talked about increasing the thrust on the engines, sort of like the thrust bump on the Airbus, the 321 thrust bump, which not only increases range, but it increases your thrust where you can get up to altitude quicker, your range, your fuel efficiency. It's supposed to add about 500 miles range to the airplane, which that's another hour flight. So it's, and I think right now it already has about a 16, maybe 17 hour range as is. So, I mean, it's almost a 20-hour airplane. So with the MAX orders, the 787 orders, the Neo orders coming in, we're supposed to start receiving the XLR the end of this year, I believe. Either the end of this year or early start of next year. I don't have the article in front of me, but supposed to start receiving those. It'll be interesting to see what type of routes that the legacy airline's going to be doing. I believe it's going to open up a lot of the smaller, not only European markets, but Central South American markets as well. So it's going to be interesting to see where they launch those strategically and go from there.
Yeah. Wow. And recently, Legacy Airlines announced their fourth quarter losses. And it was how many billions? It was a lot.
It was a lot. However, right before they posted all this, they an agreement was voted in to, I forget the term right now, but to kind of even out the losses over X number of years. And that would prevent any sort of buyout, which I thought was kind of interesting, or a merger or buyout or type of deal where if you owned over a certain percentage, then the rest of the stockholders would pretty much equal the playing field for this. And I'm guessing a lot of the bigger Fortune 500 companies do this, but it was just kind of interesting to see how they can even out the debt throughout the years. Just kind of push it off, but as long as there's a plan, I guess they can do that.
Yeah, and I was always curious that whenever you have such a loss, and it's understandable, every airline's going to show some kind of loss right now. It behooves them to show that for tax purposes and otherwise as well. But, all these aircraft orders, it's kind of like you're hearing one thing where we're getting all these airplanes in the next, 4 or 5 years. And at the same time, we're losing money, billions of dollars every quarter. And you're like, wait a minute, what?
And what I would like to add to that, Tony, is a lot of people don't realize our legacy carrier, our legacy airline, we were the first airline out of all the majors or out of all the legacy carriers for aircraft orders. So the rest of the players are gonna be in the exact same boat that we are in. However, the good news that we are in right now is that all of our loans are at a cheaper rate than what they're anticipating for new order airplanes for the other carriers.
Right.
So I'm not a an accountant, but for just an average guy, it sounded okay to me that we're, if you think about it that way, we're sitting in a much better spot than our competitors.
Yeah. And time will tell. Now we have the ushering of a new CEO coming in next month. The current president will switch seats with our current CEO over at Legacy Airlines, and once he takes the realm or the helm, it'll be interesting to see what changes come, because there's always change when there's a new chief sitting at the teepee.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Day one, there's going to be a laundry list of, all right, this is now the new, president of this, and so is doing that. I mean, I think I think it's good. I think the current CEO, he's got quite a legacy with being the CEO of airlines for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And overall, the guy did a fantastic job. Do I agree with everything, or did I have problems with some of the things? Of course, I think a lot of people will, but overall, when it comes to keeping up with the industry and the global market, the ups and downs, the highs and the lows, he did a great job. So hats off to him, and I'm very excited to have a new CEO who's obviously been with us for forever too. But I think sometimes you need somebody new in charge to take you to the next level, or just get you through the current situations and move on to the next.
Yeah. It's always good to have a fresh pair of eyes on a time of change where there's a lot that is going to be happening strategically for the company. Now, in terms of pilots and aviation, I mentioned I had a jump seater, and this week I've had 2 flights with jump seaters, and both were new hires. One was a new hire on their way to Dallas to finish up their training. The other, last night, unfortunately, he actually had a pretty good story. He had just finished his last leg of IOE, and he was a 737 first officer. He was telling me he spent 4 years at Sandpiper, and he got hired 4, and he got hired through the front door, not through the flow.
Oh, okay.
He was one of the very few that actually have that opportunity. But he had been flying for quite some time at different regionals, and he had some military experience on his belt behind him, and so he definitely spent a very short time at Sandpiper on the 145. So we knew a lot of the same people. We were having these conversations before all of this, heavy load was happening with, maintenance and returning to the gates, or RTGs, as we mentioned earlier. So he ended up, we're like, what are you going to do? Because he was LaGuardia based, and he was doing a 2-legger to San Diego to his home. So he did LaGuardia to Dallas, and then we had all this issue going on. Last flight of the night, it got canceled. So he's like, well, I'm responsible for my own hotel because I'm just on my way to work. The company's not going to give you a hotel if you're commuting. That's your responsibility. So I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do. Good luck, And so we saw him as we were walking towards ops after we deplaned and we're off the plane. And he goes, I just got a trip. I'm like, what? He's like, I called crew scheduling and told them I don't know what I should do. And they're like, well, you want to fly? You're legal to fly because you only flew like 1 leg today, and you're still within your time period. We'll give you a layover, an overnight. That's a hotel for you. And he goes, I'll do it.
Nice. Premium probably too.
Probably.
Premium
So
OG.
here he is, a new hire, and he's already working the system. He's like, well, it's going to be hard pressed to find a hotel tonight. I'm commuting, so I'd have to pay for it myself. Let me volunteer for a trip as long as I'm legal for it, and the company will then issue me a hotel, and I'll just go home tomorrow, whatever. And that's exactly what he did. I'll be like, good job, man.
Yeah. Working the system. Wow.
Well, I also wanted to talk about checklist usage. Now, checklists, from day one, we realized how important they are. I can remember not so long ago, one of our featured guests was telling us a story how he kind of skipped over the checklist and did it by memory and had an engine fuel starvation problem with an emergency return. Pete Tendenda on that show, when he talked to us about doing his night solo cross country. And because he didn't have the checklist in his hand and used it, he forgot to turn a valve on the fuel check sump valve on the engine. And what was happening is the carburetor was being starved of fuel. So his engine died. And then as soon as the fuel came back a little bit, then it started up again and then it died. And he was able to hobble back to the airport safely and land with his heart getting close to having a heart attack at 20-something years old.
Me too, while I was listening to him tell the story.
Yeah. It was a great story. And he was so kind enough to share his experience with us in an effort to bring that knowledge out, that checklist usage is crucial. Well, I've got to admit, earlier in the month, I had a scenario where we got to the gate and there was some kind of issue with something in the way. There was a cart in the way. They moved the cart, and then the jet bridge wasn't working, and the captain made a PA to the passengers, ladies and gentlemen, the jet bridge is not working. Just bear with us, have a seat, be comfortable as soon as they can get that thing connected. And then we had all these distractors. So we finally, we kind of look around and we're like, well, let's start packing it up because who knows how long this jet bridge is going to take. We start packing it up. We're talking now. The door's open. The flight attendant's like, is anybody coming? Can you call him again? It's like, okay, I'll call him again. So, they're deplaning. We get off the plane. We walk halfway up the jet bridge and we get out and we look back at the airplane and the beacon light is on. And the captain and I look at each other like, what the did we run the shutdown checklist? I thought we did. Obviously we didn't. So here we are. We both turn around, go back down. The beacon light was the only thing left on. But still, it's a minor thing. I catch it all the time. But what if it was more? What if it was an engine running? Granted, we would have had a bunch of alarms and bells and whistles going off at us if that was the case. What if it was a fuel pump? What if it was something else on that checklist? So, again, another moment of humility. Now, that happened to me, and I felt like a schmuck because, the captain felt bad. I felt bad. We looked at each other and we're like, we can't let that happen again. So I've developed a technique now. As soon as we get to the gate and the parking brake is set, I'll take my checklist and I put it between the foot holder and the MFD. And it stays there. And I will not take it out of there because it's right there in front of you until we run the checklist. Because we get distracted often at that stage in the game. Yeah. And it's something that you do day in, day out. You don't even think about it. A lot of times when we read the checklist, the captain gives the responses, and they're like looking out the window. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kyle, have you ever had a situation like that?
One time we, same thing, similar thing, got distracted, forgot to run something. And we didn't get off the airplane. We were just kind of packing up our stuff and just something didn't feel right and said, hey, did we finish this? And I don't know. Let's run it real quick. Okay. So yeah, my technique is any checklist usage. I usually pull the tray table out on taxi out and taxi in, and I'll fly with it in the stowed position. but that reminds me of, hey, we need to accomplish any checklist at that particular stage of flight. And works out well for me, and especially when you get distracted like that, that's what there's for.
Yeah. And Rob?
Yeah, I kind of adopted the similar technique with the tray table. I mean, that tray table serves multiple functions. I don't know how I survived in the 737 without the tray table, but yeah, I use the tray table as a as a stand for my checklist, and as we're when it starts for the before start checklist, my checklist is on there, and it's out there the whole time until the completion of the before takeoff checklist is complete. And as soon as we TCAS TARA, as soon as our before takeoff checklist is complete, I put the tray table away, I put my checklist away, and go about the flight. And then obviously there's checklists to do on the way down, arrival into the airport, but terminating the flight as we pull into the gate. As we're pulling into the chocks, the tray table comes out, checklist goes on the table, and I don't put the checklist away until the checklist is complete. And then after that, I have my own little flow with I start checking all the checklist stuff that the captain responds to, because you're normally heads down into the checklist, and I don't want to say parking brake, him go on and checked, and then I go at the same time.
Yeah,
it is on and checked. I mean, you could, but it's just you don't need to. I mean, you kind of need, if you're hearing what I'm saying, you kind of need to, but you don't need to like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So after the checklist is complete, then I'll do my own little quick flow. Park and brake, fuel pumps, beacon, that whole thing. And every now and then I'll miss like the bleed for the APU or something like that. Turn it on right away, because some guys don't like to turn it on as soon as they get to as soon as they shut down the engines or something like that. I think it's probably for the exhaust smell. But
we have a 3-minute limit.
Their heads are, their attention is putting their stuff away, and I'll just reach up there and go put it on.
Yeah.
So
I think the book says 3 minutes after engine shutdown before selecting the bleed air to prevent exhaust gases from ground equipment leaks, and engine spool downs to enter the cabin. Blah, blah, blah.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works pretty good with the Airbus with that tray table. I mean, that thing is it works in so many different ways other than just holding your meal and drink up there.
Do you let the tray table slam, or are you always very careful?
I am a gentle tray table. I learned early in my maintenance career that airplanes are not like cars. Cars, you close the door by kind of slamming it. Mm-hmm. Airplanes, you pull it close. You don't slam it close. But every door, every compartment, and everything is I kind of gently do it. I kind of treat everything like that too. I don't like to add any extra force, because I've had to fix things before.
Yeah.
And
yeah, boats and airplanes are always we call them other women's names, right? They're always like named after a woman. So treat it like a lady, gentle.
Yeah. Well, it's my daughter. I went through this with my daughter's doors, and they get kind of upset, and they go stomp up to the room. You'll get to this, Kyle. The kids will just slam the doors, boom, and at one time they slammed it so hard that it like broke the door frame.
Oh.
So I took the doors off the hinges for them, and I was like, well, that'll solve that problem. Now, not only you're not getting privacy, but you're not gonna be slamming any doors for a while. So fix that up, and then painted it. I used some Bondo epoxy to put it back together, sanded it, painted it, so all looked good. Didn't have to replace the whole thing, and then put the door. And by the way, she had to help me do it.
Oh, good.
And so that was part of if you want the door back, you're going to help me fix it. You damaged it. So anyway, I learned that in my military career, just, fixing things. If you treat it with a little more respect, it'll last a lot longer. They'll treat you the way it's designed to be treated, designed to be flown and work. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a gentle touch guy too. Kyle, be honest.
Gentle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't like the noise.
Yeah, you're an aircraft owner, or you are, or you still were. You still are. You understand that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like that with everything. I'm very particular. I'm not a germaphobe. As a matter of fact, I barely wipe stuff down. I feel like my immune system needs to be on its toes at all times. However, I like the seatbelts. I make sure that there are no crumbs left on the seat. The seatbelts are crossed and fully extended and folded so they're not on the floor. The seat is always in the full upright position and full forward so that the next crew member can stow their bag appropriately without having to reach over and move the seat. I make sure every vent is open before leaving the airplane. That's my pet peeve. You get in there and it's stifling hot. Those avionics, all those avionics and screens and monitors and computers, all of them produce a tremendous amount of heat, whether it's hot outside or not. And even with the airflow from the auxiliary power unit and the PAC system, they still gets hot up there. On top of that, you have the greenhouse effect with all those big, nice, beautiful plexiglass windows, whatever they're made out of. It's all just hot, hot, hot. So I close all the shades, I open all the vents, and I turn down the brightness on all the displays, regardless if it's going to be sitting there for 20 minutes or 10 hours. It doesn't matter. I do that simply because that's the way I prefer to find the airplane, and I'm going to extend that courtesy to the next person. Am I, and here's my question, over-exaggerated?
Are you turning down the screens or are you turning off the screens?
No, just down.
Okay.
No, I don't like turning them off because then you have to go through the cycle, and if you don't turn them on in the right order, then you get the PFD on the wrong side, and you have to hit the transfer button, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I turn them down, all the way down. And some airplanes, when you turn them down, they're like black. Other airplanes, you turn them down, and it's the same level as when you turn them up bright.
Yeah.
The rheostats are dirty or whatever.
Yeah. Those are the old AW airplanes, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you guys, what do you do the same?
Thing. Pretty much.
Vents open, just clean up your seat.
I use go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
Vents open, clean up your seat, clean up the area around you. I don't turn down the PFD or the MFD, but just kind of tidy it up because it's a pet peeve of mine too. When the vents are not open and it's 100 degrees out, you walk in, there's trash all over the place, and what kind of pushes me over the top is when crew leaves their trash bag full of trash.
Yeah.
I've walked on a couple airplanes with that. It's like,
and you know what they used to do, Kyle, and I think we should bring it back. What you do is you look up the crew members of the previous flight, and then you find out where they're based, and you march that trash bag right into their mailbox at work.
Yep. Put the tail number and the flight number.
Yep. Tie a little knot in it so it doesn't spill, and just shove that whole thing. They'll
get it.
But let me ask you this. How often do you check your mailbox at work?
I had to do it the other day. I got this cool present.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. The coffee
me
cup
too.
with the Squawk Ident logo on it. It's amazing. I don't know who snuck that in there, but
special edition.
Thanks.
Special edition for crew members only of the Squawk Ident podcast. Yes.
That was a nice surprise, Tony. Thank you.
Very nice, Tony.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah. I want to do something special for just us. And I have another pretty cool thing coming. I designed and ordered some t-shirts. Let's see what they look like. And if they're great, we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
So the next thing I wanted to talk about, if we have time, Kyle, are you still good, or you got a couple minutes?
Yeah, probably about 5 minutes.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about informational picketing that's been going on. If you follow the news, DFW had an event recently for the day in 20-degree conditions with blowing wind. We had hundreds of pilots for Legacy Airlines on the curb at the airport holding up signs. Informational picketing is what they call it. It's not a strike. It's not a picket line. It's just informational picketing. Why? Well, number one, it's illegal for transportation industry employees to strike without a judge telling them they could do so because we fall under what's called the Railway Act. Now, the Railway Act was not always in place, but has been in place for many decades. So, we're not allowed to strike. We're also not allowed to have what's called a job action. That's when everybody goes, "Hey, you gonna call in sick? When? Friday? Okay, Friday. You're gonna call sick Friday? Yeah, I'm gonna call Friday. Okay." Next thing you know, you have thousands of canceled flights because, for whatever reason, hundreds or if not thousands of people decided to call in sick on the same day. That's also illegal. And if found guilty, there could be penalties under federal law. So the one thing we can do is picket, informational picketing. And another event is coming up on February 11th at the Los Angeles International Airport. The union that represents Legacy Airlines, or our sister company, I could say, will be having an event. Yours truly will be in attendance. Why? Because we have been flying now for over 2 years without a current contract. What does that mean? That means our annual average index of compensation for the industry has not been occurring. That means every single first officer at Legacy Airlines has left on the table about $20,000 worth of compensation from the average industry index that we have not been receiving. Why? Because we're flying under an expired contract. I also learned recently that we at Legacy have not had an industry gains contract since the year 1997. Meaning, every contract signed since after 1997 has been in some kind of loss in compensation or benefits. A contract under duress, whether that be economic, socioeconomic, political, it's irrelevant. The fact remains we have not had a better contract than the previous one since 1997. We work hard. We are responsible for the lives of many, not just our passengers, but everyone associated with the aircraft that we are in charge of. Now, first officers aren't the ones that sign their name in the book, but trust me when I say, if something were to happen, both the captain and the first officer are at the committee. They're at the board meeting. They're at the what do you call it? Congressional hearing.
Yep.
So you're both responsible and you both have a say. We no longer work under the totalitarian rule of the PIC. We are a crew. And when one of our crew members is uncomfortable, they have a say. And it's our responsibility to do the right thing and listen. Well, we should be compensated for that with the industry average. Delta just announced, Kyle, I saw you just posted this, that their contract is getting really close to an upgrade. Now, what can you tell us about that?
Yep.
Well, they're going for a different type of approach. And historically, it's always been throw money at the group and, leave the work rules where it is, where it generally benefits some sort of way of the company. Delta's approach has been a little different. They have realized that compensation is not only a benefit to have, but compensation is not always what you're looking for in this case. Mm-hmm. Work rules are a big factor. And when I talk about work rules with any contract, an hourly rate is just an hourly rate. However, if I have the ability as a pilot to trip trade, premium pickup, transition months, things like that within the Section 6 of the contract, the hourly rate goes out the window because now you're getting double, and they're 200%, I believe, right now. So you're actually going to be making more than just the hourly rate. So they're taking that angle, and they're not so much about the hourly rate. They're more going to be about the work rules and how it goes back to how can you play the game. I can make a lot more money with the different work rules than I can on the hourly rate, and that's what their main focus on is right now.
Yeah. So there's so many shells in the game, right? So one shell is what your compensation rate is. How much does a 2-year employee make versus a 10-year employee make? What does a topped out captain, a wide body captain make versus what a 5-year FO makes on an air body? These are all the very basic part of the contract is your compensation. But there are so many other shells in the game. There's what you pay for your medical expenses and your benefits versus what the guy down the street at that airline pays. How many days off a month are you guaranteed? If your trip cancels mid-sequence, what are you compensated at? Are you just pay guaranteed for your trip, but now you're under recovery obligation, which is a dirty word here at Legacy, which means you basically are now on reserve and they could do whatever they want. Last month, they used me and my trip ended under recovery obligation 30 hours, actually 29 hours and 50 minutes after my original sequence was scheduled to end. And because I am qualified as an international pilot, I fall under the 30-hour rule. So although my flight canceled due to a mechanical out of my control, I got to go home that night. But the next day they called me and said, we have a flight for you later tonight that goes into the next day. And I said, well, that starts way after my original trip ends. And I called my union rep and they verified it ends within 30 hours of when your original trip was ending. So it's legal. And yes, you have to do it. So there are all these little nuances, all the different shells in the game. Retirement benefits, leave of absences, medical leaves, all these things are put into the contract and they all have a certain value. And at the end of the day, it is a judgment or an opinion of who has the better contract. Now, for years, Southwest and Delta and JetBlue were the top 3 airlines. UPS and FedEx were the top 2 cargos. And everyone looked at their contracts as a starting point and then negotiated from there. Unfortunately, with Legacy especially, it was always a downward negotiation. So we definitely need to get this going. So I'll be out there spreading the word to the public with hundreds of my fellow pilots at the Los Angeles domicile on February 11th.
Cool, man. Yeah, I had to miss the one we had in Dallas a couple Fridays ago because I had the COVID.
Yeah.
But I was keeping up on social media and, doing that kind of support with sharing the message and everything. So, but yeah, it's important. I agree with you and everything you said. There's a certain amount of changes that need to happen to bring our contract current and make it competitive with our competitors, and make it standard an industry standard. We're substandard in many areas, including scheduling, benefits, stuff like that. So
a big factor that I call it is accountability, especially with Section 6 stuff, is the ability for any company to do that with no extra compensation is just criminal.
Yeah, that's true.
Once you throw accountability into, okay, I'm taking you off your trip that's still going out or that canceled and you're getting home, 30 hours later, outside of the footprint that you bid for, any company that has to start paying some sort of premium or penalty, they're going to leave you on your trip the best you can, or even in the trip early, and they'll save them money because then the whole trip, saving them from paying you the whole trip of premium.
Yeah.
So that's what Delta's doing right now with their contract stuff. It's all accountability. They're going to take a lesser pay rate, but there's accountability with Section 6 and better work rules and better insurance. And they're going for 22% retirement stuff right now. So yeah, so it's all about the contract, and whoever has the best contract is going to win out the most employees.
Right.
So,
and that we're in a good spot for that, right? Because here we are. Every company that is the mainline carrier in the U.S. has announced astronomical hiring goals. Now's the time. And that's why I think our union is taking this opportunity to get the word out now, to put some pressure on completing this contract. And it actually, I think, benefits the company as well, because if we wait until after Delta and United and all these other carriers, sign their contract,
right,
our union's going to use those new contracts as a base,
as a benchmark,
and
sure.
That benchmark, then we have to go back to the drawing board, and now that takes time. It's all legalese and contracts, and we're talking about Section 6 of an employee contract. It's like a FAR aim. It reads like that.
And in addition to that, the you mentioned hiring. Our new hires are getting smarter. It's a applicant's market, so to speak. So they can take a look at the situation and the naughty business that's been going on, on the legacy side, and make a decision whether they want to come here or not. They can see some of the other companies on how they handled their, negotiations and stuff, and decide, is legacy the place I really want to be if this is how they're going to handle, or this is the kind of contract that they're going to accept or whatever. So
yeah.
And with going back,
what does Olivia think?
Well, she thinks with all the debt that our company is in right now, that in order to pay down that debt, you got to hire crews to fly it. So in order to hire crews, you got to have one of the better contracts to attract people to come move airplanes for you. At the end of the day, it's all about supply and demand. And finally, the regional days, I think, are coming to, I wouldn't say an end, but they're coming to a change where we're going to go back to some sort of small airplane. And if they want any sort of flying coverage, regional wise, it's going to have to be a mainline aircraft. It's going to be a junior airplane. And that's the only way that they're going to get people to come in through the door in order to cover all these routes. So, yeah, the future of all these airlines are changing in how they think, just due with the demand. But once again, it goes back to the contract. Whoever has the better contract, that's where everybody's going to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
For years, we've been talking about the hub and spoke system of the regional airline industry and how it was developed and why it was grown into what it is today and why they got more than 50 passenger jets. It was because they could fly more people with less pilots because those airplanes held more. Now, why are any regional airlines flying 88 passenger, what they call the minibuses, right? These 175s and whatnot aircraft? Well, because they don't have to pay their pilots as much. And not only that, they don't have to pay their flight attendants, their maintenance workers, their contracted out services, because it's a regional, and therefore they get it at a regional rate. So it makes sense for the company to use the regional airlines to their benefit to feed the hub and spoke system of the wide body or the narrow body aircraft that the mainline carries. But Kyle, you're absolutely right. I've been saying it for years. The current system cannot sustain itself because we just do not have the numbers of pilots sitting in the wings ready to go. Sure, mainline can hire and flow through from regional because those pilots are qualified. But who's going to take over at the regional level? How many people? It's very, very limited.
We're limited because even our legacy cadet program that we're involved with and had an episode how to become a pilot with that. we're not training as fast as the retirements and the demand needs. And a lot of people don't realize from zero time to CFI, it's at least a year and a half. And on top of that, you got to have another 1,000 hours, which is another year, maybe a year. That we're talking 2 to 3 years down the road before they even can get in the cockpit of an airliner.
Yes.
I think once again, I think we're going to see shifts with that type of flying in the near future, because just nobody's doing it. And also, going back to the contract, people are willing to pay $70,000, $100,000 for flight training, because now with all these bonuses, not only at the regional level, but what you can make at a legacy carrier, you're going to be able to repay back any sort of loan, any sort of debt, where you couldn't 20 years ago. Making $18,000-$20,000 a year didn't make any sense to go through flight school at that rate. So I wouldn't say pilot shortage. I think it's more of a pay issue over the last years, and it didn't attract people. And not just the legacy. We're not just doing the legacy cadet program. United just announced, I think it's Aviator or something, that they just announced recently
over in Phoenix.
Wouldn't be surprised if Delta announced one here in the near future. So then we're gonna, and that might be it. That might be the entry level. You come in and we'll train you. From here, you go all the way through like they're doing, and we're promising everybody jobs at some part of their career, as long as we'll help you with training, we'll help you with pay, we'll help you with loan stuff. But you got to come work for us.
And if you don't, then you'll have to pay back the loan at a higher rate or whatever in a time schedule. So it's definitely a way to build loyalty with your employee base by offering them the training and the funding for that. I think I'm going to make a prediction here, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong. Age 70.
Maybe.
Ain't happening.
You don't think so?
The problem is we're getting into all the European and the international countries that even now with age 65 won't even allow 2 65-year-olds flying together. So there's a lot of, depending on the country, there's a lot of I wouldn't call it age discrimination.
There are restrictions there. Yeah, there's ICAO. There's ICAO medical restrictions. I think that if that does happen, if the airline board that convenes, like I think once a quarter, they get together all these CEOs from all these regional and major airlines in the U.S. They have this big conference. I think if they get enough political power now, with even Sullenberger appointed to the ICAO representative for the United States, I think it's possible that we could get an age 70 or maybe age 67 and a half domestically.
I can see 67, and however, by the time they pass any of this, once again, it's going to be 5 years down the road before anything happens. It's already going to be too late.
And it's a Band-Aid solution.
It's not going to help our immediate situation now.
No. So, do I see the age? Yes. Is it a good thing? Maybe. It's a Band-Aid on a long-term problem.
Exactly.
That, quite frankly, the airlines created it 20 years ago. So, whoever thought it was a good idea, it wasn't. So, and then on the flip side of that, though, if they do, let's say, extend it for domestic, I mean, how many pilots have you guys flown with that have retired and have gone and found a little 91 job or a little 135 job flying 100, 150 hours a year. Most of the guys that I have flown with that are about to retire have said, if they extend the age and there's some option for, I only want to fly, 30 hours a month, 20 hours a month, just to keep, as long as I can keep my medical, just something to do. I do that in a heartbeat. But then again, now you're getting into, well, this guy's taking all the good trips, blah, 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 because he's senior. That'll open up another can of worms. But
I know a lot of people want to go to 67. I think that's something that, Social Security kicks in at 67. I think it's full Social Security. So, that'll bridge that gap from the mandatory 65 to when your full Social Security benefits kick in. And, there's a whole, financial trigger at 67 for most people. So anyway, I think, when like you said, in regards and respects to our current hiring, I wouldn't call it a problem, but situation that, all the legacy carriers are finding themselves in, the retirement 67 isn't going to, if anything, it'll just kind of stagnate it for 2 more years.
Right. I mean, we saw that stagnation when the 60 rule turned into the age 65 rule. It was a Band-Aid at the time. It was one of the last acts as the President Bush was leaving office to change it from 60 to 65. He had approved it, and it was a Band-Aid. And it was a stagnation for people like Rob and myself, who were FOs at the time getting ready to upgrade, and all of a sudden that all got slowed down by a few years because of it. So it's not good for the pilot group to see an age increase. Now, if you're at the top 1% of the pilot group, the ones that are getting ready to retire, that want to continue to work, that feel that they have the mental capacity, the physical capacity to continue to fly, then for them, I can see how it's a good thing. And I think as we progress with evolution, the older and older we're getting, we're still keeping a lot of our physical and mental abilities to do things like fly. 65 is not that old anymore. So I do see it changing. I do predict that there will be an age 70 at some point in the future. I don't think it'll be an international. It'll have a restriction on it to where, okay, you have to fly domestically, and the other pilot on the flight deck has to be at least like 60 or less or whatever. But I could see that happening, because what history has proven to me, at least, is that the industry is very much reactive, because being reactive financially looks better on paper. And unfortunately, the proactive decision making that really is what is making a company successful in the long term is just not practiced here in the US.
Well said.
Yep. Out on the money.
And those that are listening and hear the coos and the ahas, for we have Miss Olivia joining us.
Oh, she's adorable.
Hello.
Thank God she looks like her mommy, though.
95%.
There you go.
Say hello. Say hi.
Hi, Olivia. She can't hear. She's like, oh no.
Oh, she's getting headphones on. Hi. Hi, sweetie.
Hi.
She's adorable. She's going to be your producer. Soon enough, she'll be producing your show, saying, moving on.
Nice.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Kyle, for joining us today, and Rob as well. We've had some great conversation. We've been talking about these featured guests that we're having. Schedules are what they are, weather is what it is, and plus, for those of you following on the social media, I've got more and more projects happening every single day at the house there, including, I think maybe tomorrow if I make it home, 3-inch lift is going in on the FJ, so wish me luck.
Cool.
As long as the parts get there on time. Now
I might have some exciting news coming up too. I'll tell you if it happens.
Oh, well, now you really have us curious. Great way to end the show, Rob.
Little teaser out there.
Absolutely. Well,
new boat, Rob. Dave,
Not saying it.
well, again, thank you to Rob D and Kyle J for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to spend this time with you. And thank you, Olivia, for dropping in on the show. Please help us out by sharing the podcast online and with your friends. Be sure to subscribe or follow to the Squawk Ident podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. We also love receiving listener feedback. You can send us an email or even audio feedback via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you'll find audio archives, photos from the flight line, guest book photo tab, and the Squawk Ident pilot shop, where you can order an assortment of t-shirts, hugs, and hugs. Where you can order an assortment of t-shirts, hats, mugs, and much more. You can also contribute to our show financially right there from our homepage, either through PayPal or however you can. And you can contribute financially with a one-time donation or a recurring donation. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under Squawk Ident Podcast or Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident. Also, a big final thank you to all of you for joining us today, for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'll see ya.
Bye, Olivia.
Bye, Olivia.
Yeah, bye, Louie. Bye.
Bye-bye. She's like, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Where's my bottle?
Yeah, she points and says,
Can you fly this plane and land it?
It's an entirely different kind of flying.